card utilization. That is one of the most asked topics when it comes to credit and your credit score. So in today's video, guys, I'm going to talk to you about what is credit utilization and what you need to do to make sure that you have the best credit utilization to maximize your credit score to get all of those points for that category. Y'all make sure y'all stay tuned. Welcome back to Starr Knows Credit. My name is Starr Carter, and on this channel, I talk personal financial education. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, please consider being a subscriber. You guys cutting on your notification, that way you don't miss out on a video, and give this one a thumbs up, that way it gets pushed out to more viewers that might want to see this content as well. Without further ado, let's go ahead and let's get into today's video. Credit utilization. What is credit utilization? So in the most plain terms that I can put it, credit utilization is the ratio of credit that you have available against the credit that you have used. So when we're mainly talking about credit utilization, we're talking about the credit cards or your lines of credit or your home equity loans. Anything that is a revolving line, meaning that it's just a revolving door. You use it, you pay it, you get it back. You use it, you pay it, you get it back. So that's revolving. So anything that has anything to do with revolving credit is calculated in that 30% usage. And credit utilization is a significant factor in your credit score because it counts for 30% of your credit. I did a video on breaking this down and how this look like to the lender. So I told you guys in that video, FICO automatically gives you 300 points and we're trying to get to an 850. So 300 points FICO gives to you. It's up to you to come up with the other 550. So credit utilization, with it counting 30% of your score, that equals up to 165 points that you will come up for in that particular category. So we're looking at 165 points. That's a lot when it comes to you coming up with 550 to get to an 850 perfect credit score. I've also talked about payment history being 35% of your credit score, which is 192.5 points. And if you add that with your 165 credit utilization, those two combined is going to be a big significant amount of points of the 550 that you have to come up with to have the perfect score, as I just said. So if you've never had a late payment, if you've never had a collection, if you've never had a charge off, a bankruptcy, or anything that can fall into a negative payment category, then next thing you should be looking at is your credit utilization. If you've always been on time with all your things and none of those other factors that count into the payment history and your credit is still bad, then let's look at your credit utilization next. Credit utilization is looked at on the individual account level, but it's also looked at into totality of all the revolving lines that you have. So say you have 4 or 5 credit cards, you have a personal line of credit with a limit, and say you have a home equity loan. All those things are going to be looked at individually for 30% utilization, and they're also going to be added together to get the average of all those revolving lines together to come up with the 30% utilization as well. So utilization is being calculated on 2 levels, individually and together. And there's another thing that you have to factor in, and this also is a part of credit utilization, but it's not calculated the exact same way as revolving. Now, say for instance that you have a installment loan. Now, installment loans are calculated different because they have a set term, and all of the interest and the payments is automatically in that term agreement that you made when you apply for that loan. So if it's a personal loan, if it's a car loan, if it's a student loan, you have terms on those loans. So student loans, particularly cause you to have your credit score stagnant, because student loans, they're deferred, waiting on you to get out of school, or we just got out of the pandemic that the student loans were frozen for 3 years. And so now that you're picking up and repaying those loans again, you're probably only hitting the interest and not the principal. So that's also a part of credit utilization, because the credit score is looking at what was your original loan amount to what your loan is now. And so as years are going off and that loan is not coming down, that can also be a factor in your credit score, especially if your credit is not moving. That can be a factor. So it's very important that when you get credit cards or lines of credits, even your overdraft protections, those are lines of credits as well, that's hooked to your checking accounts. You do not want to max those out, because if you max those out and do not pay them by the time that they are reported to the actual credit bureau, this is going to drop your credit score. Because as I was telling you guys, your credit score is a risk score. How risky are you? When the lender is looking at your credit score, they are looking at how risky are you. So anything under 650 is getting very risky. At this day and age, really anything under 700 now is getting really risky. We always used to say that you could get a card with Chase and American Express with a 680, but now because of delinquency, credit card delinquency is so high, credit card debt is in the trillions, you're gonna almost have to have a perfect credit score, at least a 750 and above going forward, in my opinion. So it's very important that we look as less risky as possible when we're trying to get funding for whatever it is that we're trying to do, whether you're trying to buy a home or you're trying to buy a car or you want to start a business. This is where credit utilization is really going to play a key factor next to your perfect payment history. So when you max out a credit card, and what I mean by maxing out a credit card, just in case if you're new and you don't know what that means. Say you got $1,000 limit and you get the $1,000 card and you go out and you do shopping and you spend the whole $1,000, and you allow that to report on your statement, and your statement is what is actually reported to the credit bureau. Well, when your card is maxed out, that means you're at a 100% usage. And we just said that it counts for 30% of your credit score, but you also want to keep it under, well under 30% as well when it comes to the actual credit limit that you're using. So if you got $1,000 credit limit, you never really want more than 300 to be reporting to the actual credit bureau from your statement. I always say keep it under 10%. That's my sweet spot, 2 or 3% per card. When it comes to that, you want to make sure that you are making sure that you are not maxing out your credit cards, because not only does it look terrible and can drop your credit score, it also screams that you could be in financial trouble. Because most people that have the money to pay their credit cards back off, they're going to pay them back off by the due date, and it won't even get to their statement to actually even report a high balance on their actual credit report, because they're paying it off. Either they're paying it off more often, or they're paying it off completely by the due date to avoid being late, and also to avoid paying unnecessary interest to the bank or to whoever has furnished the card. So when you have credit that is not moving the needle, even though you're paying your payments on time and you're doing all the right things, you're not applying for too much credit, because that's also a factor, and you're not averaging out your average age of credit. You're letting your credit build longevity so that you have a strong foundation of credit. As long as you're not doing those things and your credit is still not moving, you got to look at your credit utilization. So let's go ahead and let's look at some of the things that you can do if you are in a high credit utilization category right now with your credit. So the first tip that you could do to lower your credit utilization is to pay off your balances as quickly as you can. Do not carry a balance. It's not necessary for your credit to be high, okay? You do not have to carry a balance, but you do need to keep your credit utilization low. So therefore, you need to pay your card balances off. And that way you won't get into credit card debt, and you're not being in the risk of your credit utilization being high. So if you don't have the money to pay off all your cards right now, if you do have some maxed out credit cards, then you really need to be looking at the snowball debt method of paying off your cards. I did a video on how to get out of debt in 2024 that I will link above. Another way you can do this, which would be tip number 2, say you don't have the money right now to pay all your cards off, but you're going to start the snowball effect. As you starting to pay those cards down, you can always request a credit limit increase by those different card issuers, and that can also help your utilization because your limits will be a little higher than what your usage is. So as you're paying it down, if you're already maxed out right now, it may be hard to get a credit limit increase because, as I said, you look risky. You look like you may get a credit limit increase just to continue to max out that card even with the new limit. So you got to start paying it down first before you request a limit increase so that they can say, okay, look, she's trying to pay these cards down, or he's trying to pay these cards down. You need to get it down pretty, at least if you are maxed out, let's get it down to 60% of the limit and before you even try to apply for a credit limit increase. But that can help because you're getting away from the limit in the usage. My next tip is to pay your credit card bill more often, or pay whatever that revolving line is more often, because you can always make multiple payments. You don't have to wait on it to report to your statement when it goes to the actual bureau. So if you get paid every 2 weeks, then you can pay your card every 2 weeks. As long as you're making the minimum by the due date, that's going to keep you from being late. But if you need to pay multiple times throughout the month to keep your utilization down, especially for cards that have really low limits, like your 2 and 3 and 4 and even $1,000 limit cards, it's so easy to run those up. Because as I was saying, with $1,000, you're not supposed to have more than 300 reporting. And I don't even want you to do 300. It should be like 250 if you're going to even go that high. So you just want to be careful because the lower the limit, the easier it is for you to hit the 30%. So look at your cards that only have a $200 limit. That means $60 can only be the reported amount. That's a really small limit, and you're really close to taking your credit score with that because it's not a lot of money that gives you that gap between usage and the limit. So you want to just make sure that you're paying your cards off more often, especially if you have those really low limit cards. The next one I would recommend is the timing of when you are making your payment. So you need to really and truly look at your statements and learn how to read your credit card statements, because all credit card statements do not look the same. They're going to basically tell you when you're due, what the minimum payment is, and what your statement balance is. And you want to always aim to pay your statement balance because that was the balance that was reported on the last billing cycle. So you want to pay that right back off to avoid being late and also to avoid paying unnecessary interest, as I said before. But knowing when your actual statement closed, that means that that's the date that the credit bureau is going to send that information to the credit bureau to let them know, okay, this is Starr's balance on this day, okay? So I'm gonna give y'all an example. My Navy Fed flagship rewards card is always due on the 10th. That's the due date. Unless it falls on a Saturday or a Sunday, it's gonna always be on the 10th. And if it falls on the weekend, then it'll be that Friday before the weekend starts. So I always look at that date. So it's always usually on the 10th. Then my statement closes 3 days after my due date. So my statement closed on the 13th. So me knowing that information is valuable because here's the thing. I can pay my card off, whatever my charges are. I can pay that off on the 10th to avoid being late on the due date and also avoid paying interest. You say you only have 1 or 2 cards. Well, you want to keep a small balance so that it can have something to calculate, but you do not have to carry a balance and pay interest to do that. You can always charge something small the day after the due date in order for it to have something to calculate. So your statement is going to roll around usually 3, maybe even 6 days after your due date. So when you're looking at your credit card statement, you need to be looking for statement closing date or cycle end, something like that. That's going to let you know when your statement is going to actually be reported, and it's going to have a date. I did do a video walkthrough. I think it was on my Chase card that I did about 2 years ago that I will link as well. So just knowing when your statement is going to report, you can play around with that. You will know, okay, let me go ahead and pay this card back down, all the way down to zero by the time it reports on the statement. And then once it's reported on the statement, like mine is on the 13th, like I said, for my flagship card, I can use the card again on the 14th, and then the credit bureau will have no idea what it was that I charged on the 14th. So if I wanted to, I could run it back up on the 14th if I wanted to, and they would have no idea because it was reported to them, that balance, on the 13th. I hope this makes sense. Leave me a comment if it does or if it doesn't. Another way that you can control your utilization is, say, just for an example, I have the flagship card, as I just said. It's got a $35,000 credit card limit, and then I have other cards. So say if some of those other cards are maxed out, I can always try to move balances, or either try to get cards that have like 0% APR. So it's like moving the debt around. I'm not a big fan of moving the debt around, but you can always finagle the utilization that way. If you have other cards that have higher limits, you can always see about balance transfers and moving money around. That way you're keeping your utilization on the average of all the cards, as well as individually under 30%. So you may have to move some debt around. I'm not a fan. I'm all about paying it off, but that is an option. And the last one, and it kind of piggybacks off this other one, is, opening up a new credit card account that can also help your utilization. But here's the caveat to that. If you got a bunch of maxed out cards and it's already keeping your credit score kind of low, it's going to be hard for you to get a pretty good limit credit card, getting approved for one. So that's why I say it's best to pay those balances down on the cards you already have and see if you can get a credit limit increase instead of getting new credit. But that is an option depending on where your credit score is. You can still get a credit card that can help lower that utilization even further. But I'm one of those ones that if you're already in the hole, you just got to stop digging, okay? Don't keep digging. If you're already in the hole, just work on trying to work on what you already got going on. So in conclusion of this video, it's just important that we make sure that we're not looking risky. And not looking risky means paying our payments on time and making sure that our credit utilization is always low. Always aim to be under 10%. I always just find that to be the sweet spot to maximize that category for your credit score. You want all 165 of those points to go into that 550. So make sure that your finances reflect inside of your credit report. If you got good finances, that should show up in your credit. If you're struggling with your finances, if you're having trouble with income and paying your payments on time, that's why it's showing up in your credit report. So make sure that we're doing the right things to not look risky. And as always, if you need any one-on-one help, or if you want to be a part of a growing community of people that want to learn about personal finance and credit, you can always join the Credit Ready program. I'm always accepting new members. So make sure that you check out that information in the description as well as the pinned comment. Also, guys, I got some candles here at the bottom, some financial candles that'll help keep you motivated and inspired while you're on your credit journey. Make sure you guys check that out below in the shop. As always, I appreciate you guys stopping by. Make sure you check out these next two videos next, and I will see you in the next video.